Picture this. Somewhere beneath the mountains of southern Iran, 800 missiles sit in complete darkness. Not destroyed, not intercepted, but sealed inside their own fortresses, unable to reach the surface, unable to fulfill their purpose, unable to serve the nation that built them. For 30 years, Iran constructed an underground empire designed to be unbreakable. A network of tunnels and chambers that would allow them to threaten global oil supplies and strike with impunity. But in just 10 weeks, the entire strategic foundation of that doctrine was dismantled, not by collapsing mountains, but by sealing doors. This is the untold story of how military brilliance defeated military architecture, and why 800 missiles now represent not strength, but catastrophic weakness. For decades, Iran's strategy rested on two fundamental pillars. The first was their ability to lock down the Strait of Hormuz, holding the global economy hostage through oil blackmail. Every single day, 20 million barrels of crude oil flow through those narrow waters. Control Hormuz, and you control the world's energy security. The second pillar was something far more sophisticated. Their invincible missile cities, vast networks of tunnels buried deep beneath mountains, immune to conventional attack, capable of surviving anything the international community could throw at them. Iran invested 3 decades and countless resources into perfecting this system. They believed they had created an impenetrable fortress. But by May 2026, both pillars had collapsed, and the consequences were far more devastating than anyone anticipated. Let's understand what Iran actually built. Qeshm Island sits only 22 kilometers south of Bandar Abbas, commanding a critical position directly over the Strait of Hormuz. This location wasn't chosen randomly. The island's subsurface is composed of salt rock, limestone, and complex sedimentary layers that naturally resist airstrikes. For over 3 decades, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps exploited this geological advantage, constructing an enormous underground network that extends tens of meters into the earth. Within these tunnels lies an entire military city. There are assembly areas where missiles are prepared, storage zones where weapons wait in darkness, command centers where senior officers coordinate operations, and sophisticated automated rail systems that connect to hidden exits scattered across the landscape. The system operates on a cycle called exit, fire, return. Missile launchers are brought out of tunnels, fire their payloads, and immediately return underground for protection. The arsenal inside was genuinely formidable. Noor and Qatar 380 anti-ship missiles with ranges extending 1,000 kilometers across the Arabian Sea. Silkworm and Ghadar series ballistic warheads ready for deployment. All waiting, all armed, all prepared to launch. But this network wasn't limited to Qeshm Island. Beneath the mountains of Bandar Abbas and throughout Hormozgan province, there existed dozens of similar facilities, each one a component of Iran's integrated deterrence architecture. Together, they represented Iran's primary mechanism for enforcing a blockade of Hormuz whenever the regime decided to use it. These facilities were organized by depth into 3 distinct tiers. Tier 3, located at 30 meters below the surface, was the most vulnerable to penetration. Tier 2, positioned between 60 and 80 meters down, offered partial protection but remained susceptible to sustained attack. Tier 1, buried between 120 and 150 meters deep, was supposedly immune even to the most powerful bunker-busting munitions available in 2026. However, the facilities controlling Hormuz, particularly those on Qeshm Island and in Bandar Abbas, were predominantly Tier 2 and Tier 3 facilities. This represented a critical design trade-off. These coastal facilities were built for speed, for operational agility. The exit, fire, return cycle needed to happen within minutes, not hours. This requirement for rapid deployment meant sacrificing the deeper, more heavily protected Tier 1 positioning. That design choice, made for tactical speed, would become Iran's greatest vulnerability. This raises the fundamental strategic question: how do you defeat a military system that's specifically designed to be unreachable from the air? For decades, military theorists believed you couldn't. You would have to destroy the mountains themselves, penetrate through hundreds of meters of rock, and collapse the entire tunnel system. But the answer developed by the United States and Israel was far more elegant and far more effective. Rather than attacking what you cannot reach, you attack the interfaces between the bunkers and the external world. You don't destroy the tunnels themselves. You destroy the exits, the ventilation shafts, the resupply corridors, the command nodes that transmit targeting information, and the preparation areas positioned just outside tunnel mouths. The brilliant insight was this: you don't need to collapse the mountain. You only need to collapse the mountain's ability to connect with the battlefield. This strategic framework wasn't theoretical. It was actively implemented starting in March 2026. On March 17th, United States Central Command confirmed the use of multiple GBU-72 deep-penetrating munitions, each weighing 5,000 pounds, against hardened Iranian missile zones along the Iranian coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. The GBU-72 is a precision weapon specifically optimized for tunnels and bunkers, capable of penetrating up to 30 meters into solid rock. It can directly strike Tier 3 facilities and collapse the exit points of Tier 2 facilities, creating effective seals without destroying the underlying structure. The strategy was sophisticated and calculated. Every weapon was precisely targeted. Every strike designed to minimize collateral damage while maximizing the sealing effect on critical access points. Then came the major operation in June 2025, coordinated between Israeli and American intelligence agencies. Israeli officials called this operation Launcher Hunt, and the scale was staggering. 293 active missile launchers were destroyed in a single coordinated campaign. 95 of those launchers were buried inside collapsing tunnel openings and ventilation shafts. According to subsequent Israeli military assessment, approximately 200 launchers were completely destroyed, while another 80 more were disabled by tunnel entrance collapses. The operation was executed with remarkable precision. Every target corresponded to actual operational capability. Every strike advanced the strategic objective of sealing Iran's deterrent. But the most revealing statistic came from the Israeli National Security Advisor's briefing to the Knesset. Iran began this conflict with approximately 2,500 ballistic missiles. Over 500 of those missiles were launched directly at Israel in various retaliatory strikes. An estimated 800 missiles remain trapped inside damaged tunnel networks that are no longer functional. 800 missiles not destroyed by conventional means, not intercepted in flight, but completely locked away within their own underground castles, rendered useless, incapable of deployment, impossible to reach. This single statistic fundamentally reframes the entire strategic debate. The assumption that dominated Western media coverage was binary. Either Iran's tunnels were invincible or they were destroyed. But there exists a third state, and it's militarily far more interesting and strategically far more devastating. Being sealed is, in many respects, worse than being destroyed. A missile standing inside a sealed tunnel with collapsed exit points, with severed resupply routes, with command nodes cut off from the surface world, is not merely damaged. It's an inaccessible inventory. It's a deterrent that cannot be deployed. It's a weapon that has been rendered strategically useless. Iran had inadvertently transformed its missile cities into missile graveyards, massive underground monuments to a doctrine that could no longer function. The battle on May 7th, 2026, was the public manifestation of this sealed reality. On that day, 3 United States Navy guided missile destroyers, the USS Truxtun, the USS Rafael Peralta, and the USS Mason, were transiting from the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf of Oman. Iranian forces launched multiple ballistic missiles, attack drones, and fast attack boats without warning or provocation. The result was absolutely zero damage to American forces. Not a single ship suffered so much as a scratch. Not a single drone achieved contact with any target. Not a single fast boat penetrated the defensive perimeter. Central Command announced it had eliminated all incoming threats and subsequently targeted Iranian military facilities responsible for the attack, including missile launch sites, command control centers, and intelligence gathering nodes. Every single facility struck by American forces directly corresponded to a specific position that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps had exposed by using it moments before. The Iranians had revealed their operational capability and paid an immediate price. But this raises the critical question: why would the IRGC launch an attack they knew they couldn't win? The answer reveals the deepening desperation within the Iranian command structure. The IRGC wasn't operating from tactical confidence or strategic advantage. It was operating from rapidly narrowing options. The weapon systems they could still reach, whose tunnel exit points were not yet fully sealed, had to be used in a desperate attempt to demonstrate that Iran's naval power remained intact and credible. Doing nothing would have been a complete admission that Hormuz deterrence had fundamentally collapsed. The regime needed to maintain the appearance of strength, even if that appearance was illusory. The command structure behind this May 7th attack makes the situation even more concerning. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Navy commander was a man named Tangsiri, the very architect who designed the original tunnel network, the commander who conducted propaganda tours just months earlier, declaring that Hormuz was fully under Iranian control and the United States could never challenge it. Tangsiri was neutralized during the Israeli operation in a direct strike on Bandar Abbas on March 26, 2026. Intelligence Chief Benhem Reza and several other senior officers also lost their lives in that same attack. The command structure that executed the May 7th attack was an organization in which the chain of command had been severed at multiple levels. Mid-level commanders, who should never have been making strategic decisions, were attempting to operate weapon systems whose primary exit points were partially sealed or non-functional. This attack resembled an institutional reflex more than a carefully calculated military operation. The system attacked not because it calculated victory was possible, but because it couldn't afford to project complete paralysis. An even more striking detail emerged in subsequent intelligence reports. Iran had completely lost track of the naval mines it had placed in its own waters, and could no longer open the Strait of Hormuz, even if it wanted to. An army that cannot account for its own weapons has lost basic command coherence. An army that launches a coordinated swarm attack and achieves absolutely zero damage has lost meaningful offensive capability. This wasn't a military force at the peak of its power, exercising strategic patience. This was a controlled collapse, attempting to project confidence it could no longer genuinely sustain. Subscribe to Eliza Grant Reports right now to stay ahead of critical geopolitical developments that shape global security. Every video brings you the analysis mainstream sources miss, the strategic insights that explain what's really happening in the Middle East and beyond. Don't wait for tomorrow's headlines when we break down today's defining moments. Join thousands who are already watching our comprehensive analysis. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so no crucial update escapes your awareness. The May 7th battle also revealed the complete collapse of the IRGC's swarm doctrine, a military strategy the organization had spent 3 decades perfecting and developing. The theory behind swarm attacks was elegantly simple: small boats with minimal radar profiles, rapid approach speeds, and coordinated saturation attacks would theoretically overwhelm the Aegis combat system's tracking and engagement capacity. The gap between a threat emerging and a military response to that threat was supposed to be the IRGC's asymmetric advantage. On May 7th, this theory was tested in actual combat conditions and produced utterly devastating results for Iran. 0 damage, 0 hits, 0 success. United States forces deployed H-64 Apache attack helicopters and MH-60 Seahawk platforms as dedicated anti-swarm tools. These aircraft completely eliminated the IRGC's supposed asymmetric advantage. The continuous air presence provided by the Apaches closed the temporal gap that was the foundation of Iran's entire swarm doctrine. The advantage that was supposed to be unbeatable was neutralized in a single engagement. President Trump's subsequent comments summarized this emerging strategic reality. He stated that American forces destroyed the attackers and that if Iran doesn't sign a ceasefire deal soon, the United States would topple them much harder and more violently. This language was striking not for its aggression, but for its confidence. This wasn't the language of the superpower viewing its opponent as a serious peer threat requiring careful management. This was the language of a power that had concluded the conflict had decisively shifted in its favor, and that the outcome was no longer in meaningful doubt. But we need to be fair and intellectually honest here. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is not completely helpless or without resources. An organization that spent 30 years constructing these sophisticated tunnel networks has also invested heavily in developing serious countermeasures and defensive systems designed to protect those tunnels from exactly this kind of attack. At the structural level, the tunnel networks were constructed with extensive redundancy, multiple exits, fake entrances designed to deceive satellite surveillance, internal compartments that compartmentalize damage, and sophisticated traps designed to absorb kinetic energy from penetrating munitions are all present throughout the systems. At Keshim Island specifically, the natural geology provides additional advantages to this redundancy strategy. Salt rock formations contain extensive natural cave networks, and combining these naturally occurring caves with artificial tunnels creates multiple alternative exit points that satellite imagery cannot fully catalog. At the operational level, the IRGC has deployed rapid repair teams throughout Hormuz province. Debris removal operations and tunnel reopening work is clearly visible in satellite imagery. The organization is actively working to restore functionality to damaged facilities. Deception tactics are also in play. The IRGC has deployed decoy launcher systems, created fake tunnel entrances to mislead satellite monitoring, and is pre-distributing some missile stocks outside the tunnel systems to create uncertainty about actual remaining capability. The aim of these deception operations is to mislead United States satellite monitoring, create strategic uncertainty, and maintain ambiguity about which struck exits are genuine and which are elaborate fakes. At the technological level, the IRGC even announced the development of underwater missile tunnels in early 2026, essentially submarine launch capacity that would theoretically bypass the exit point problem entirely. Whether these systems have achieved genuine operational status has not been independently confirmed by any third party. According to assessment by United States intelligence services, as of May 2026, Iran has restored access to 30 of 33 Hormuz sites and still maintains approximately 70% of its original missile stockpile. So, the ceiling was not completely permanent or irreversible. The IRGC has reopened some exits and restored some operational capacity. But here we must recognize a critical distinction between two very different concepts. Restoring access to tunnel exits and returning to full operational capability are fundamentally different military achievements, separated by enormous time and resources. Clearing a collapsed tunnel entrance of debris can be accomplished in days with focused effort and engineering teams. But rebuilding damaged command infrastructure, placing experienced commanders to replace killed senior officers, and reprogramming coordinated launch sequences with multiple distributed nodes takes considerably longer. The loss of experienced command personnel, particularly specialists like Commander Tangsiri, creates institutional knowledge gaps that cannot be quickly replaced with junior officers. And the biggest handicap remains constant. The United States maintains air superiority over the entire region. All of these repair operations are being conducted under open skies, where every movement can be monitored by American satellite systems in real time. When the IRGC opens an exit to conduct repairs or launch operations, they have simultaneously told the United States this is an active target. This creates a vicious cycle for Iranian commanders. If the exit remains closed, the missile cannot be deployed. If the exit is opened for use or repair, the position becomes vulnerable to immediate strike. The IRGC is trapped in a no-win scenario, where both action and inaction carry severe penalties. The economic crisis makes this equation even more difficult to solve. Tunnel repair is extraordinarily expensive. It requires specialized engineering teams, heavy construction equipment, concrete, structural steel, and sustained operations across multiple sites. The Iranian regime's oil revenues have essentially collapsed to zero due to international sanctions and blockade effects. The national budget has contracted dramatically, and the IRGC cannot even pay salaries to its own soldiers on schedule. Under these crushing economic conditions, funding the repair of tunnel infrastructure becomes increasingly difficult. The regime faces an agonizing prioritization decision. Will limited resources be allocated to repair tunnel exits, provide subsidies to a population struggling with 60% inflation and basic commodity shortages, or increase internal security spending to suppress the civil uprising that has resulted in more than 30,000 civilian casualties? A regime simultaneously massacring its own population, attempting to repair collapsing tunnel infrastructure, negotiating a ceasefire through Pakistani mediators, and trying to project military credibility against 3 American carrier strike groups, is operating at the absolute limit of institutional capacity. The tunnel network problem isn't merely military in nature. It's fundamentally financial. This is a resource prioritization problem, and every single day those exits remain sealed is a day Iran cannot repair the critical infrastructure that made its deterrence credible in the first place. The calculus facing Iranian leaders becomes more desperate with each passing week. Let's examine the big picture, because the tunnel crisis is not simply a military problem confined to one geographic region. This represents a strategic transformation that directly affects Iran's entire negotiating power, its regional influence, and ultimately, the regime's security. Iran started this conflict with approximately 2,500 ballistic missiles. Over 500 of those missiles were launched directly at Israel in various retaliatory operations. 800 missiles remained trapped in sealed tunnels. Hundreds of additional missiles were destroyed in surface strikes and air-to-air engagements. The remaining inventory is shrinking rapidly with each passing operation. Every missile that is used can no longer be replaced because the Hormuz blockade has cut off all weapons imports and resupply from allies. In ceasefire talks conducted under Pakistani mediation, Iran's primary negotiating card rested entirely on the existence of these weapons. The threat that we will close Hormuz is a valuable negotiating tool because 20 million barrels of oil flow through those waters every day. It's economically devastating leverage. But when American intelligence agencies, the British GCHQ Signals Intelligence Organization, and Israeli Signals Intelligence systematically mapped and struck tunnel exit architecture over a 10-week period, Iran's negotiating power was quietly hollowed out. The regime now must negotiate from weakness rather than strength. The world economy is being held hostage to the uncertainty surrounding these questions. Brent crude oil prices soared above $126 per barrel. Ship passages through the Strait of Hormuz dropped to just 5% of pre-conflict levels. 2,000 merchant vessels are currently stranded in the Persian Gulf, unable to depart, unable to complete their commercial voyages. Vital's CEO, Russell Hardy, provided precise calculations. 1 billion barrels of oil production will be lost due to the war overall. 600 to 700 million barrels of loss has already accumulated. The global economy is being held hostage not by an arsenal that can freely fire, but by uncertainty about how much of Iran's arsenal can still function. This uncertainty itself represents a form of leverage, perhaps the only form remaining to Iran. The naval blockade also triggered a simultaneous food supply emergency in Gulf Cooperation Council countries that are dependent on the strait for more than 80% of their caloric needs. By mid-March 2026, 70% of the region's food imports had been disrupted. This is no longer abstract geopolitical theory. This is families in Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain paying emergency prices for basic food items. This is American drivers facing gasoline prices not seen in years. This is global aviation burning extra fuel, circling around closed airspace, while commercial flights are rerouted thousands of miles from direct routes. Secretary of State Rubio spoke with striking clarity about the American position. We cannot tolerate a system where Tehran decides who uses an international waterway. This defines the American red line in explicit terms. The military tool enforcing this red line consists of 3 carrier strike groups: advanced F-35C fighter aircraft, Aegis-guided missile destroyers, Apache attack helicopters, and precision bunker-busting munitions, all deployed and fully operational throughout the region. Iran now confronts a critical question that isn't whether its tunnels survived the attacks. They did survive. The mountains remain solid. The weapons inside remain intact. The real question is whether surviving without functional access is the same thing as genuine strategic deterrence. Iran built its missile cities to be impenetrable fortresses, and in a certain sense, they succeeded. The weapons inside are safe from external destruction, sealed within solid rock. But the United States didn't destroy the mountains. Instead, it sealed the doors. It collapsed the exits, blocked the ventilation systems, severed the command chains, and cut the resupply corridors. A fortress whose doors are sealed from the outside is no longer a defensive bastion. It's a vault. A vault full of weapons that no one can reach is not a military asset. It's a monument to a 30-year doctrine that has become obsolete in the face of superior technology and strategy. The IRGC did develop countermeasures against this threat. Rapid repair teams work continuously. Fake exits are constructed to deceive satellite monitoring. Underwater tunnel concepts are being developed to bypass the exit problem entirely. The organization restored access to 30 of 33 sites. But as long as air supremacy belongs to the United States, every opened exit becomes a new target for precision strike. And economic collapse erodes the repair budget a little more with each passing day. Basic resources become scarcer. Fuel becomes more expensive. Concrete becomes harder to source. Electrical power becomes less reliable. Discover the geopolitical analysis that major networks won't cover. Connect with Eliza Grant Reports for in-depth investigations into conflicts reshaping global power. Our team delivers rigorous research, credible sources, and strategic analysis you can trust. Hit subscribe now and activate notifications to ensure you never miss crucial developments affecting international security. Your understanding of global events depends on access to unfiltered information and expert perspective. We provide exactly that. Subscribe today and join our community of informed viewers. What are your thoughts on this developing situation? Share your perspective in the comments below. We read every response and value your insight. To stay continuously updated on emerging geopolitical developments and strategic analysis, subscribe to our channel and turn on notification alerts. We release comprehensive reports regularly, and you won't want to miss any of them. Thank you for your time and attention today.